When you are ready to make a buttonhole, you need several items. 1, you need a buttonhole foot for your machine. 2, you need to know what size button you are going to make. 3, you need a ruler so you can measure distances. 4, you need some sort of marking tool made for fabric. And then of course you're going to need the bobbin and bobbin case for your machine. When you start, you're going to actually thread the bobbin case a little bit different than normal. You just stick the bobbin in like normal to this point, but to have a nicer looking buttonhole in the end, you're actually going to take your thread and stick it through the eye on the finger of the bobbin case. This adds just a little bit more tension to the bottom and pulls the thread to the bottom of the fabric so the top looks nicer. And then you place it in your machine like normal. The second thing that we change when we are doing a buttonhole is you put the actual buttonhole foot on your machine. To do so, we need to take off the old presser foot. At the back there's this lever you pull on and the presser foot comes right off. If you notice at the top there are those holes go onto this peg. So you just bring it, tip it on, push it all the way up, and then lower that lever to clamp it in place. And an additional thing to note, when you have your buttonhole foot on, you want both these threads to be underneath the presser foot. So when you send your needle down to grab the bobbin thread, bring it up just high enough. You can snag that bottom thread and the top thread comes down through the hole in the presser foot as well. So they're both off to the side. At this point, you're ready to start your buttonhole. To start your buttonhole, you have to change to the buttonhole setting. When you first turn on your machine, it's on stitch 1. The buttonhole is stitch 0. Press 0 and it changes to the buttonhole. It's telling you that it's going to go down the left side of the buttonhole first, and then depending on what step of the buttonhole you're on, different sides are going to flash. When you are making a buttonhole, you start with the button you're actually going to put through the hole and some scrap fabric to make sure that you have it just right before you put it on your final project. You're going to need to figure out what size of buttonhole will actually allow this button to go through it. Best place to start is to measure your button. If you stick the end of the button at 0, you can measure the diameter. I know this button is 7/8 of an inch long. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to add to it the thickness of my button. My button is 1/8 of an inch thick. 1/8 plus 5/8 is 8/8 or 1 inch, which means I need to make an inch long buttonhole. I'm going to take a marking tool and actually mark it on my fabric so that I have a path to follow when I'm making my buttonhole. I'm going to come right here. You need to be at least a 1/2 inch from the raw edge of fabric either direction, depending on the buttonhole. And I'm going to draw a start line. From my start line, I am going to, right in the center, draw out the length that my buttonhole is supposed to be. I like to call this the runway. There we go. I have 1 inch. And then across the end of the runway, I'm going to draw a stop line. I now have a start line, a stop line, and a runway. Now I need my machine. With my sewing machine and buttonhole setting, you're going to notice there's a little window right here that the needle goes up and down, and a little line across here in the middle, straight out from the needle. I'm going to take my start line and line it up in this window, and my runway is going to be right in front of here, so that I can follow that line down the length of my fabric. So the start line's in the window, and my runway is straight down the center. With the machine and buttonhole setting, it's going to sew down one side, and when we get to the stop line will be in the window, we will stop. Make sure to guide your fabric from side to side so that it doesn't tilt, and that runway always is with that center line. There you go. Until inside that window you see your stop line. A little bit more. There we are. And once you are stopped, you need to tell the machine to stop measuring the side of your button. This crystal was measuring the length to tell your machine how long the buttonhole is going to be. To tell it that's the end of the buttonhole, you just press your backstitch button once, and it goes, ah, I know how long this buttonhole is now, and it will complete the rest of the buttonhole for you. So just sew until the machine stops on its own. Once again, guide the fabric so it goes straight. It will come up to the top, go across the top to finish the top, and then come back down on the right side the same as it did on the left. When it reaches the bottom, it will go across the bottom and finish it off just the same. And it stopped on its own. If you sew with a stuttering foot so that it stitches a couple of extra stitches at the end, or you stop a little bit early, the machine remembers those stitches and will add them or take them out of your next buttonhole. Lift up your buttonhole foot and pull out your fabric. And there you have a beautiful buttonhole. Once you have your completed buttonhole and you've trimmed off the threads, you need to open this hole to make sure that your button will actually go through it. One of the easiest ways to open a buttonhole is to fold it right in half so both rows of stitching are right on top of each other. And actually clip with your shears right in between without cutting your stitching. And then, of course, that's not the whole buttonhole. You'll insert the tip of your shears here and very carefully work your way to the top without cutting the top stitching. Turn it over and repeat with the other half of the buttonhole. Make sure you don't cut any of your stitching, because if you do, your buttonhole will unravel. Now we have a hole. You take your button and you see, will it go through? It does. You want it to be slightly snug, because over time buttonholes do stretch, but not so hard that it will drive you insane every time you try to put the button in the hole. If this is accurate on your scrap fabric, you are now going to grab your actual project, and you're going to do very similar to what you did the first time. You are going to draw a start line wherever it is you want your buttonhole to be. But this time when you sew it, that is all you need. When you are sewing additional buttonholes after you've done the first one, your machine has memorized the length of that first button. So all you need to do is put your button start line in that window where you want it to be. Make sure you go straight, and from start to finish you can sew the entire buttonhole without lifting up your foot pedal or pressing the backstitch button. When it reaches the bottom, it will automatically go up to the top and finish the other side. And once again, it will stop on its own.